Hi, my name is Minda. I like the introduction saying I have a lot of broad range of skills and experience, which is true. Sometimes that also means people get very confused about what it is that I do, because I do quite a lot of different things. So in the last few years, I've been entirely freelance. I've done a range of roles from being a marketing manager, project management, event management, producing, public speaking. I've done facilitation, improvised comedy, occasionally done performances. So yeah, it's quite a wide range of things that I do. And it's really annoying because it means I don't have like one specific job title that I can put. As we go further along, and I'll talk about like how you promote yourself and things, you'll see why that can be a bit of an issue, and it's why I don't have a LinkedIn profile. So starting up in the top left-hand side, how did I get here? So I didn't really start working in arts, culture or heritage. I started working for university. So my undergraduate degree is in international relations and politics. I was actually really quite academic when I was doing my A-levels. I did quite well. I was always a last minute kind of person. So I'd always do everything last minute, hand things in last minute, but I got good grades. I was one of those really annoying people. And then I got to uni and I started to really struggle. I started my course and was like, actually, I really hate this course. It doesn't work for me. But I kind of kept going. As an adult looking back, I think there's probably a high chance it's down to undiagnosed ADHD, but I'm not a medical professional, so I can't claim that. Yeah, so I found my first year of uni really, really difficult. I ended up redoing my first year, but that worked out really well for me because what happened was I decided to get a job working for the uni. It was just for a few weeks, and it was working with international students and the orientation team. So welcoming them to the university, making sure they felt comfortable, running activities, all that kind of thing. And I got to meet loads of people and actually started kind of building on my connections and my CV from that point. So I did that job sort of over the 3 years that I was studying, or 4 years if you count the first year that I redid. And actually met a lot of really interesting people. And then I got involved with a committee at university called the International Students Committee. The university I was at has a really good students' union. They consistently win like awards every like most years. And some of their committees and societies are actually really useful. And I still talk about a lot of the work that I did within that committee now, quite a few years later on. So I started doing events management. So as part of the committee, we had sort of a remit to do 4 big scale events a year. I say big scale, mid scale probably. So we had like an international week where we would showcase lots of different cultures. We had a food festival. We had a couple of other nighttime events and sort of like nightclub events. And we sold out every time. And I think the ticket sales were something like 1,400 and we sold out. And looking back, it's kind of insane when now, having had the career I had, where I go, that's what I was doing as like a 19, 20-year-old. We had to raise our own sponsorship, so between £11,000 and £20,000, and that was the students doing that. And that was on top of all of the support we got in kind, so like venue security, loads of other stuff, lots of people volunteering as well. So when you kind of look back and think about it, each of those events was probably tens of thousands of pounds. And we were responsible for making it happen. So that's where I sort of started in events management. After I graduated, I spent a few months looking for work. And it was really weird because I worked for the university. So I was a student ambassador and they really liked me. So they kept me on. But I was like, is this not a bad impression, the fact that I've graduated? And I'm like, hi, welcome to the university. You should come here. You're going to get a really good job afterwards. I haven't got one yet. But it kind of worked out and I made it work. And on my final tour that I did as a student ambassador, I got a cheer because I was like, oh, I've got a job. And all the parents and people cheered for me, which was really nice. And I ended up working actually for the university. And at the time, it was my dream job. I moved into the international relations office and I worked for the university looking at things like partnerships that they were doing with other universities around the world or with companies, supporting like their sort of VIP visits of the people that they wanted to impress, where they'd be like, we've got to arrange meetings and tours and things with our vice chancellors and basically showcase the city and the university to its best. So there was like sort of smaller scale events management happening there. But it was a really good learning opportunity. I then moved into another university where I was like, well, I kind of want to develop the role that I was in. It had just come to an end. There was no more funding for it. And so I moved into more of a marketing role, which was really useful, but it was kind of a sideways step. It was intended to be, oh, this is going to help me get somewhere else. After that role, I panicked and decided to buy time and went back to do a postgrad in international management and marketing. Don't know why. I was a really bad student, but they let me back in and I started there. What I realised again was like the academic side was not for me and it actually wasn't useful. What I sort of learnt best through experience and through sort of being on the job. But what I did get to do was to kind of make most of all of the extracurricular stuff again. So as part of my course, I had the opportunity to go abroad for 2 weeks and do a summer school and do it like really quite cheaply as well. So I just sort of went, yeah, it's a good opportunity. Somebody else is organising it. Great, I might as well do it. And the range of options were, some of them just sounded really boring. Some of them I didn't know what they were. And there was one that was in the Netherlands. And it was like in service design thinking. And I was like, I don't know what service design thinking is. I Googled it, still couldn't work it out and just went, oh, it's fine. It's 2 weeks, doesn't count towards a grade. I hadn't done study abroad or anything. I was like, might as well. So I went and actually it turned out to be a really good opportunity. It was a company where I got to learn a lot. It was really creative, really interesting and combined sort of my interest in the business side of things, of just lots of different sectors and I guess the creative thinking. So I had a really good time and then was really fortunate that they actually offered me a job at the end of it. So I just went for 2 weeks as a summer school and they got in touch afterwards and was like, well, actually we have a role coming up for 3 months. Would you be interested? And that was partly due to being part of the EU, which meant I could say yes. So I went and ended up working there for 3 months. After that, my mental health was not great. I'd kind of been doing this postgrad course, which was just draining me because I ended up coming back and being like, oh, I'm still supposed to be doing a dissertation, still supposed to be doing exams. I really don't enjoy this. So I ended up actually for my health having to take a break and I moved back home and came back to Nottingham. And I took a lot of time out. I was really privileged and lucky that I could do that. I could move back home and not have to worry about paying rent and covering all of those things. But it meant that I was in a bit of a weird sort of situation where I wasn't doing anything. I was stressing because I was like, what's the next employer going to think? Because I've got this gap in my CV. I don't really know what I'm going to do next. So I started filling my time trying to just meet people, trying to go to events, trying to kind of network. So I know that kind of as being a student, my experience of networking was like, oh, it's a really corporate thing. It's quite scary. You need to go, you need to have a business card, all of those things. The first networking event I went to, I was unemployed. So I ended up pitching myself to the room. There was a point in the network where you could, or in the event where you could stand up and pitch a project, or if you were looking to work with somebody, I decided to pitch myself. And it just so happened that in that room there was an American entrepreneur who in Texas ran a really big events management company, and she had moved to the UK temporarily and was running a business here. So I was like, oh, this is great. Hi, I've got events management experience and I would like to gain more. And initially I started doing sort of half day a day with her, just gaining, experience. It was sort of experience, but then I think she got to know me and she was like, oh, actually, you're quite skilled and you're good at things. So that then turned into like a 2-3 day job role, freelance, and then I ended up picking up more and more bits of work from her. So that's kind of where my freelance work started, which then goes on to, it feels like a really long story, but I did get told I have 45 minutes to fill. So also, hopefully it will be useful in kind of showing you that there's not normally just a straightforward path. So I do know that, again, my experience at university was like, you go to school, you go to uni, you do your GCSEs, you do your A-levels, you go to uni, they tell you what you're meant to be doing. There's a structure, there's 3 years, there's exams, you get to the next point. But kind of once you're out, unless you follow a really sort of straightforward like graduate scheme or something like that, there isn't like somebody going, here's the next thing you should be doing. And especially in freelance life, there isn't like a step-by-step process generally. So yeah, while I was working for Mary and her company, The Simplifiers, I started again connecting with more people in Nottingham, went to an event. It was an arts event that was being run by an all-female and non-binary theatre collective, and they were looking to put on sort of festivals and things like that. And they said, oh, we're looking for people to join our team and to like help us put on more events. I was like, that's interesting. Went and spoke to them and said, I've got events experience and I don't have any theatre experience, but I like the theatre. and I've got marketing experience. I'd really like to be involved. And they said yes. At the time, I didn't know that there'd be any paid opportunities out of it, so I was just like, I'm really excited, I'd love to be part of this. But it turns out that they were putting in a funding bid, and that funding bid led to a week-long theatre festival at Nottingham Playhouse. So that really sort of helped me, I guess, break in, because it was paid work. It was really good for building up connections. I also managed to kind of enhance my status, because I was suddenly being connected to these people who've been working in theatre for years and have their own networks. And through that, I've kind of ended up doing lots of other things. I've done bits and pieces in theatre. I've done things like doing social media marketing. I do less of that now, but still do bits and pieces. I've worked for arts and cultural organisations. I've done a few bits in Leicester. So I've worked for a South Asian arts company who do big scale festivals and events. I've worked for Leicester Comedy Festival, so I'm just coming into my 4th year managing their volunteer team. I've worked for the Edinburgh Comedy Awards for 2 years now, which has been really good. I've worked for NTU, putting on an event at Nottingham Castle with the physics department, all sorts of things. It's just been really quite random. And this year I also set up a network for South Asian creators based in the East Midlands. So yeah, loads of things. But I hope that kind of just shows you that there isn't like a straightforward path. And even now, quite a few years in, I don't have one thing that I do, which is really annoying when people go, oh, can you write a bio? Or if you're trying to introduce yourself at networking events, I kind of give the version of myself that I think is going to be most useful to them. But yeah, it's also really interesting when people I've known for years who like follow me on Instagram or whatever, like, what is it that you actually do? That used to be a bit of a problem, because normally people will tell you, have your like niche, or like have your clear brand, make sure people know exactly what you do so that you can then become like the go-to person. And I do agree with that in some senses, but I just realised it doesn't work for me. So I kind of just became the person who's like a little bit mysterious, does a lot of things, but generally probably would work really well in your team. So that's kind of how I've sort of navigated that. But yeah, getting onto like practical tips, getting experience. So I think particularly as students, you're probably looking to build your skills and your CVs and your portfolios. So getting experience I think is crucial. I'll kind of again touch on it a little bit later where I talk about qualifications and skills versus soft skills. I have a degree, it's international relations and politics. I have a postgrad in something else as well. Nobody really cares. My first job required me to have a degree. They basically said they just wanted something that had the word international in the title. I was really worried because I had a 2-2 and they were asking for a good honours degree, and I was like, oh, are they not going to consider me? I got the job. I asked my manager, I was like, did this put you off? And they went, oh, we didn't even look. That was, my first job was working for the university I graduated for. The university I graduated for didn't care what my actual grades were in the end. So from that point, I was a bit like, oh, it got my foot in the door, but actually employers generally, where I was looking, didn't really care. Like my ability to write an essay isn't that useful. The ability that I can write is good. It helps me with my marketing, it helps me with structuring reports and things, but actually writing a lot of those academic skills weren't particularly appealing to employers. What did get me jobs was all of the experience that I gained. So something I've noticed with, not all, but some students is they kind of rely very much on their course to give them what they need and just to do that step by step. Well, if I pass the exam, if I get these grades, then I'll get to the end and it will all work out. And actually, you'll just end up being one of many. What a lot of employers want is somebody who can kind of hit the ground running to some extent. Of course, like you need to be able to build up your skills and your experience and learn as you go along, but they don't want to be teaching you the complete basics of how to just exist in a team or in a professional environment. So when I was 16, I started looking at places to gain experience. It's kind of changed in the last few years because there's more, you kind of have to go through more formal routes in a lot of places. I started doing volunteering at a local museum, which again, I think I was 16 and I still reference it now, and it still comes in useful in interviews or in sort of networking situations. So I started doing that. Like I mentioned, at university, I started doing events management. That was crucial, just in terms of working as a team. Again, like I said, looking back, it was absolutely insane the amount of responsibility we were given, and having to make it work. So that comes in really useful. And Also, again, I worked a lot with international students, so I could talk a lot about things like intercultural communication, working with people from different backgrounds, taking different cultures into account. All of that kind of stuff is still useful in my work today. So in terms of like how you can kind of get experience as you go along, as part of while you're studying, or again, even once you've graduated, or if you're going through a quiet period with work, I would kind of just recommend talking to tutors, talking to the people around you. You actually already have an existing network, and they're actually really invested in trying to get you opportunities. So yeah, having those conversations, talking to tutors, talking to staff, talking to people who come and do talks with you, and just being like, oh, this is what I'm interested in, what tips do you have? Do you work in events that do this kind of thing? Do you know anyone who does this kind of thing? What are exciting projects you're working on? Just getting on those people's radar can be really useful. Also, just keeping an eye out. I think following certain types of organisations. So if there's certain companies you're really interested in working in, following them on socials and seeing what they're working on. Do they have any internships coming up? Are they doing industry talks that you can attend online or in person? Are there places that you can go? And it might not be like here's a talk if you want to get a job with our company. It might be, we're having a big event in an art gallery. It's free to attend, but you've got to book and just show up. That's all you do. Book, show up, and then try and do your best with networking. I'm going to get onto networking in a bit, but getting yourself into those spaces and around those people is a really useful thing. Showing enthusiasm. There is nothing more irritating that I found when I go back to my old uni and do talks, and or to like a school and just go, and the people just don't seem interested. I'm like, well, if you're not particularly interested in helping yourself, why would I help you? So showing enthusiasm, getting into those places, having those conversations. But if you are a student, you are in a really, really good position to take advantage of everything that your university or college offers, talking to tutors, all that kind of thing, make the most of it. And I don't want to underestimate it, because all of the stuff I did at uni that was not my course is what still gets me jobs to this day. And yeah, so it's invaluable. So I've touched on networking. Networking is probably where I've gotten most of my work, networking and word of mouth. So there are a lot of things that I could recommend that people can do that I do think are good, but I just don't personally do them. So it's things like having a website, having a LinkedIn page, all of those things. Do them if they work for you, but you don't necessarily have to. So as I mentioned, my first sort of route into networking was I went to a networking event and I just got talking to people and I pitched myself. I think even as a student you can do that, because in certain situations you will be the odd one out, and that's quite useful. So if you go to a networking event and everyone there is all suited up, really serious, and they work in companies and they're well established in their careers, and you are the only student there, people are going to be interested because they're like, well, how did you find out about this? What made you come to it? Why are you here? It will make you stand out. I'm not saying you're going to get a job first networking event you go to, but you'll start making those connections. A lot of it is also about practice, so just getting used to speaking to people who are in different industries, from different backgrounds, different levels. One thing, again, I think that's probably helped me from a young age is I had a lot of friends who were a lot older than me through volunteering, things like that I did. So I didn't feel particularly intimidated in certain situations. There will be probably opportunities through your courses and things like that, where there will be opportunities to learn more about networking and practice some of those skills. A really silly one that I saw somewhere, where actually my old boss, who worked in event management, she did a talk, and she went around the room at the start and she shook people's hands, and the number of people who just looked nervous or scared to do it was actually quite funny to see. But what you realise is if you're not used to doing it, like post-COVID and post-lockdowns at least, I've become really aware that I do feel a bit more weird about shaking hands, because I'm like, oh, we stopped doing it for a while and it starts to feel odd. But if you just get back into the practice of doing things like that, you get into the practice of speaking to people, being in rooms where you don't know anyone, is like such a good skill to have. And also, again, don't worry about walking into rooms where you don't know anyone. It's the point of networking. I started experimenting at a couple of events in recent years where I've just been really tired and really lazy and just gone, I should go and speak to people, but I don't have the energy. So my tactic in those situations is to hover somewhere near the food or the drinks, and just open and look around the room because I'm like, somebody's going to come and talk to me. And they always do. But it just kind of is a bit of a weird power move to do. And it's quite funny to kind of watch it play out. The one thing I will say is just avoid being there scrolling on your phone. It is not a good look. It closes you off. It's basically saying don't disturb. But yeah, there are a lot of places you can find networking events. I recommend starting with all the free ones because don't spend money unless it's useful. I know In Good Company, I think, runs sort of arts ones. If you just Google Nottingham or local networking events, I know that universities run them as well for students and also ones for local businesses. So that's a really good way of getting in where you're in a space that's like it's your university or your college space, but it's not an intimidating space that you've never walked into or like in a hotel function room or whatever else. I particularly like the sort of more arts and culture networking events because they're a little bit more casual, it's more relaxed. Any kind of like exhibition openings, things like that, those are networking opportunities for me. So it's not always necessarily the most obvious thing. The other way is going through networks like things like LinkedIn. I'm going to be honest, haven't been on it in years. I should do at some point. But I have been thinking about it more and more because that's where people are, and that's also where people are having those conversations. So yeah, I do recommend doing that just because it's a really easy way. You're not even having to speak to anyone in person. People are literally there being like, hi, I'm here to connect. And it's a really good way of looking to see what people are working on, to see if you might want to get involved in something. If they show photos of, it could be an event they've worked on, a project they've worked on, or they share about something they've been doing, you can just comment, you can like, you can get on their radar in a really low risk, non-scary kind of way. And it's a good way of just kind of being a bit like slowly building up that relationship. I personally use Instagram quite a lot for my networking. It's not for everyone, it works for me. It's kind of where a lot of, I say my audience is, and when I mean my audience, is people that I might want to potentially work with, people I have worked with, people who run arts organisations work in them. It works for me. I think you've got to be really careful though if you are using social media where it combines your personal and your work life. I do something which some people would say is quite unhealthy. My personal and my work bleed into each other. I can't separate them. I turn everything that I enjoy into work. So I've just kind of committed to that. But there will be things like, I might post about being on a night out, but I'm not going to post a table full of drinks or something. I'm always really aware of what I'm posting doesn't just go to friends, it also goes to people who may or may not want to work with me in the future. I do post, I turn everything actually somehow connecting to work. If I'm going to look at an exhibition in an art gallery, I will post about it. And nobody there knows whether I'm there just to look at the exhibition or whether I'm there for work. I'm not lying, create the mystery. Or if I go to the theatre and I see something, am I connected to the production or am I just going to see it? There's a lot of ways where you can kind of showcase your work. If I go to an event, so I went to Taskmaster Live down in London back when it first opened up, when they were doing previews. I worked for one of the people who'd worked on it, so I got a freebie, which was really nice. But I went and I actually did a post about it, but a lot of the post was me commenting on how I spent all my time thinking about the production side of it, how did it actually work, the experience design side of it. And I wasn't working on the Taskmaster Live experience, but I managed to do a social media post about it and kind of connect it to some of the work I do and things that I'm interested in. So there are always ways that even if it's just stuff you're doing socially, you can kind of twist it and also put on a professional side to it. So that's really useful. Things like Instagram stories, again, I do a lot of stuff on there where I am posting, it's just me talking about what I'm doing, but I kind of put a bit of a professional twist on it. And again, similar to LinkedIn, if people's profiles are open, if organisations are using their profiles, you can go in and start making those connections. Instagram story is great, a really low risk way of connecting somebody, like liking something, commenting on something, asking them a question. Oh, what's that exhibition? Do you recommend going? I don't know, if I've commented, so a weird thing that I've got an obsession about is queuing systems. So at events, I am obsessed with how people get in, what the queuing systems are, crowd control, all of that kind of thing. It's just a weird, geeky thing I have. So you can imagine how interested I was when the Queen died and we had that big, massive queue. There's a whole load of psychology behind how they organise that. It's really interesting. But yeah, so if I go to an event, Nottingham Light Night actually had this. They had a really good queuing system at St Mary's Church for their event that they did there. And yeah, you can do something as basic as that. I've just gone to an event, their queuing system is really good. Great. If somebody from an organisation you want to work with sees that and they go, oh, okay, that's it's a little professional place. It's a little ping that keeps you in their memory. And it might not just be like, oh my God, this person is so obsessed with queuing, we must work with them. That's not really how it works, but it's just that thing of having regular little touch points where somebody kind of can get to know you without you actually really having to put in a load of effort. Making a positive impression. This is one of the things I've really noticed sort of working with students, working with interns. I've worked with some people where I've just gone, you're amazing, you're great, I would hire you, I'd recommend you to anyone. And I've worked with other people where I've just gone, I have no idea why you're studying what you study, or I am really glad that our time has come to an end. And so, yeah, there are some really simple things that you can do to make a positive impression. And there's little details and things. And actually, Parisa did one of these things yesterday where she emailed me to say, hey, I'm going to be here at this time, just checking in, making sure everything's okay for tomorrow. I'll meet you at like 9:50 downstairs. Great, okay, that is a good impression. So if you are starting an internship, if you're doing volunteering, if you're trying to gain experience somewhere and you've arranged something, just checking in with people, good communication, really simple. A weird thing I keep seeing when I've worked on some events recently is people being like, oh, we've got a student who's coming. We don't really know much about them, but they're meant to be helping us with our events, social media marketing or content creation, or I don't know, that was actually a real example. But yeah, whatever they're doing, they're helping on this event. And I've gone, oh, okay, great. When are they getting here? They're like, oh, they're supposed to be here 10 minutes ago. Like, oh, do you know if they're definitely coming? And it just creates this feeling of like, can we actually trust this person? Do we know they're going to show up? I will say, I do have a habit. I was late today, but what I did was I texted and just was like, sorry, I've had a nightmare getting in. But it just creates that kind of feeling of like, oh, okay, like it's not ideal, but we know what's going on. So that's a really simple thing that I think is so obvious, but I keep seeing it coming up time and time again. I think it just makes a huge difference. And also those people that you're gaining experience with, you have no idea if you're going to want to work with them again. You have no idea if you're going to want to reference. You have no idea who they know that they could recommend you to, or alternatively tell people never to work with you. So you want to make sure you're building a good impression with whoever you're connecting with, because you never know what impact that's going to have further down the line. As I mentioned in kind of some of the work I've done, so much of my work comes from word of mouth, other people recommending me from networks. And if I started to just behave really badly or just even mildly irritate people, that would dry up quite quickly. So yeah, keep all of that in mind. Just doing the basics that they teach you of the reason I mentioned the running late thing is because I do run late quite a lot. I'm not perfect, it's one of my weaknesses. But if you can have good communication, if you can show up and be enthusiastic, all of those things are going to then help you later on down the line. It could even be 5 years later where you're like, oh, wait, I need some information about somebody, or I need to pick somebody's brains, or I need a connection to somebody. Hang on a second. When I was at uni, I did a work placement, or I met this person at this company. Great. Yeah, and that kind of connects quite a lot to like building your reputation and your status. Arguably very similar things, but the kind of thoughts I had around that topic of building reputation status is you kind of want to start to become known as a person that people can go to, that they can rely on. So if, for example, I've got friends who work in like tech, so they want to be known as people where you're like, okay, I've got a tech problem, or I need someone to do something for a performance, or I don't know, to sort out the lighting for this thing. Who do I go to? And there's people where I'm like, oh, okay, they are the go-tos. They're super slick, they're super professional, I trust them. They're the people I want to go to. Or I'm organising a panel talk, and I need someone to come in that can talk as an expert on X, Y, Z. Who do I go to? And there are ways that you can start doing that actually earlier on than you think. So that could be doing things like running your own events. You could, as a student, I don't know if you've gained experience and there's something that you know, there will be things that you know that other people don't. There are things that, if you're events management students, there are definitely things that you are learning that I've never learned, because I learned event management in quite a sort of on-the-job kind of way. I didn't study it, so there will be things that you could probably teach me that I don't know, or ways of doing things. that actually I would actually genuinely go to. What can event management students teach me further down the line? What have you learned? You could join things like steering groups and committees. So I mentioned at university, I was on the International Students Committee. That was kind of more of a practical thing. There are a lot of organisations, particularly arts organisations, that will be like, okay, we're looking for people to join a committee to advise us on X, Y, Z. And you'd be surprised at like how many places are sort of really struggling to find young people. So you might think, oh, I'm quite young or I'm a little bit inexperienced, like people aren't going to be interested. Actually, a lot of places want your viewpoint. I joined a board, so I'm on the board of a charity, a UK-wide charity that's in heritage, which means I'm a trustee. I have a lot of legal responsibilities that are a little bit scary, but I joined as like a young trustee. So there's a lot of problems in the board and boards across the country where a lot of people are quite a bit older, because usually people do it when they've got to a certain stage in their career or they've retired and they've got time. But there are a lot of charities and organisations where they're looking for people to join boards who are younger. There are ways of doing that. If you Google things like young trustees and stuff, there's trainings that you can do that are free. Even if you don't end up joining a board, just doing the things like the trainings looks so good on your CV, because you start learning about things like how organisations work, legal responsibilities, finances, all that kind of stuff. So there's loads of ways you can do that. You can also do it on social media. So if you want to be known for a specific kind of thing, if you want to start creating videos, if you want to, like I mentioned, post about, I went to this thing, the queuing system was great. Don't necessarily talk about queuing, it's just my weird geeky thing. But yeah, you can start talking about that. Just go to where your audience are though. So like I said, the people that I'm usually trying to connect with, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them are on Instagram. If they're on LinkedIn, that's where you go. If they're on TikTok, go there. But yeah, use that as a way of kind of positioning yourself into a go-to person. So one of the ways I actually make money now is I get asked to join panel talks and talk about my experience. I get asked to come and do talks like this. And that's all kind of come because people go, oh, Minda can talk forever, but she's got a lot of things to say. And that again then helps me get other work, because people go, well, we saw this person on a panel talk. Somebody takes her seriously. She must be an expert in what she does. So yeah, it kind of goes hand in hand, so it's really useful for getting more work. So yeah, finances and work and lifestyle I'm going to kind of put together. So I am completely freelance at the moment, but there have been periods where I've been sort of in like an employed role, where it's kind of your traditional job, I guess. And I've been doing freelance alongside that at the same time. And that is actually how quite a lot of people I know in sort of the arts and sort of other sectors work, just because one of the downsides of freelance life, unless you've managed to get to that place in your career, is that it can be a bit up and down. You don't know when the next role is coming, the next opportunity, and it can be quite scary, I think. Quite scary, but quite stressful. So that is like one of the downsides, but it kind of means there are ways around it. So one of the things, like I said, I mentioned I worked as a marketing manager for an arts company in Leicester. That was ideal because I sort of did 3 days a week. They basically said, we don't really care when you do your work, as long as you're there for the 9 a.m. meeting on a Wednesday, check in with us. And they were super flexible, which was perfect, because it then meant I could fit everything else around it. There are people I know who do hospitality jobs, and they're also kind of working freelancing in other ways. There are people working jobs that are nothing to do with their freelance work, but it just gives them that stability and that finance. So there's lots of ways of doing that. One of the ways that made it easier for me was I moved back home, which takes out huge expense of rent. It is a very privileged position to be in. But I think it's worth saying that to people, because sometimes if you look at what people's lives look like on social media or what people are talking about in their careers, you don't actually know the reality of how easy or difficult they have it behind the scenes. So an example is, I don't have any kids, I don't have a mortgage. It takes off a load of responsibility that I know a lot of my friends have. But equally, a friend of mine who's doing very well in her freelance life, who does have kids, but she also has a partner who is working full time and has that kind of stability. So people's lives look very different, and I would say don't try to compare yourself to other people, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And yeah, in terms of work and lifestyle, so for me, I've kind of found a rhythm that works really well for me. So my brain works really well. I can do really high stress, but for like short periods, or maybe for like a couple of months. So I've had that this year, where I've had a few months where I'm working on multiple projects all at the same time. It's been really stressful, and there's a lot of times where I've just been like, everything needs to happen now, and where do I begin? But then I go through a slower period, so I'm kind of coming into that now, and it's a little bit quieter. I do have a bit of work, but it's nowhere near where it was before. So that works really well for me. Other people prefer a more steady thing, and I completely understand. Every so often I do get the like, oh, if I just had this steady job and I could go away at 5 p.m. and not then switch off and not have to stress and think about it. If you're going into events, I don't really think, personally, I've not come across a job in events where you can every day always switch off at 5 p.m. Just because of the nature of the work. But yeah, so figuring out what works for you, and maybe that does mean like for 3 days a week, you're going to go for steady career stuff. Maybe that's like a steady traditional role is actually what's going to work best for you. Maybe you'll go totally freelance. It kind of depends on what you're looking for and what's going on in your own life. One of the benefits that I do have with my sort of roller coaster kind of style is it means that I can get into things quite quickly. So often one of the things I've kind of realised I'm drawn to, or people are drawn to me for, is if there's a project and somebody's dropped out, or if there's a project that's suddenly got funding for a role, or they've realised actually we really need an extra person to come in and do X, Y, Z. There's quite a few people I know who will kind of go, oh, Minda, like she can come in and do that. And because I'm quite flexible in my projects, and I don't mind having a bit of stress at times, I can kind of take on that work. Talking of work and lifestyle, I'll go into staying organised. So if you are looking to get into freelance, and actually a lot of this is just good practical life stuff, it can be quite difficult. So actually I suppose it's kind of similar to being a student. If you've got assignments coming in from different courses and different expectations, kind of imagine they are balanced. It's not like you get given, like none of the tutors or anything are talking to each other, so you get given a load of work and it's overwhelming and then you have nothing to do another week. But it's a similar vibe. So for example, I could be here doing this talk, and then I could be at home having to look at a spreadsheet and trying to do a budget, and then on a completely different topic, and then I could be having a Zoom meeting about volunteers, and then I could be having a meeting about how to market an event. So a lot of the time my brain is jumping across lots of different things. It sort of likes it, but it can be difficult. So working out systems, and again, doing this while you're a student is really useful. So that I personally use an app called Trello. That's just because one of my previous bosses got me into it and using it for events management and planning. So I use that to kind of keep track of things, because otherwise it's just absolute insanity. And just staying on top of to-do lists. Again, just making sure you've got good communication with people that you're working with. I'm sort of smiling as I say that, because I'm like, oh, there's about 15 emails, including one I need to send back to you. So yeah, I have a lot of emails in my inbox currently ready to get back to people. But yeah, having that good communication, kind of making sure you stay on top of your to-do list, keeping your projects separate, doing things like time blocking. So there might be, I don't necessarily do this too far in advance, but I might be like, okay, I have a day working from home on Wednesday. I know in the morning I'm going to work on this project and just ignore everything else until I have to. And then maybe I'll have like an hour working on this other project, whatever, and just learning to prioritize. But yeah, there's a load of different apps out there. Figure out what works for you. Figure out a place where you can just keep all of that stuff written down. And again, also in terms of event management, yeah, and again, that's one that's just good for freelance, but also if you're looking to go into events management, being organised is one of the most obvious things. So again, if you could talk to people about whatever random organisation system you've got going, or people are just like, oh my God, you look like you've really got your life together. A weird thing I started doing this year, which I realise makes me look good, but it's just purely so that I don't lose my mind, is anytime I have a meeting and we plan in, like, oh, should we have when is our next meeting booked, or we need to go and do this thing, I'll go, okay, I'm putting it into my calendar. Do you want me to send you a Google Calendar invite? And people go, oh yeah, please. And it was a thing I was doing purely because I was like, if I don't do this now, I'm going to forget. It's going to fall on my head. I've got too much going on, and then my calendar's not going to have what I need in it. But it was a thing where I did with a few people. I went, oh, they think I'm so on top of stuff and I've got my life together. And in my head, I'm like, no, it's just to keep me sane. So yeah, figuring out systems that work for you just to stay on top of projects. Because again, if you're freelancing, there are times where I am only working on one thing. That's usually if things are quieter, or it's a project where they just need you temporarily to be almost like a full-time employee. But often I can have like 3, 4, even more things going on. So yeah. Qualifications and skills versus soft skills. So again, I mentioned earlier on, I have got a degree. Nobody really asks about it now. I've never really been asked to prove I've got it beyond my first job. I'm not saying your qualifications don't matter. I'm just saying that on their own, they're not necessarily going to get you very far. And there are definitely, because so many other people will have the same qualifications as you, plus other things. And there are definitely situations where I've gone into interviews or into informal meetings where I'm potentially looking for work, where I've clicked and gone, oh, actually, the most important thing that I need to get out of this is I need you to like me as a human being. So I can maybe throw in stuff about my professional career, but ultimately, it's do I connect with you? Do we get annoyed about the same things? Do we care about the same things in our particular industry? Can we just have a conversation? So I quite like going into interviews or informal talks about roles just because it's basically, I treat it like a chat. It's a conversation. And yes, I am trying to sell all of my skills and things like that, but it's doing it in kind of a more natural way and kind of going, oh, if we build up a connection, because you've got to work with me, right? So I could have all the skills in the world and I could get things done, but if I'm just awkward to be around in an office, or you don't enjoy talking with me or working with me, you're probably going to ignore that and go with the person who might be slightly less qualified in a on paper sense, but actually you're like, great, I'd rather be in a team with you. But yeah, that goes all the way back to like all the stuff I mentioned. Make the most of uni, get all the experience that you can, because you can have that thing on paper, but what makes you different to everybody else? What makes you look like someone who can hit the ground running and be part of the team and actually be useful, I guess. So I've managed interns before and I've worked with them before, and I've definitely worked with, like I said, really great interns, and I've had interns who were not so great. And an example that I kind of give where I'm still really confused by to this day is there was a day in the office where I was like, actually right now managing interns is taking me away from the work that I really have to do. And sometimes people kind of forget that managing people, supporting people, and kind of helping other people gain skills does take time and energy. And I enjoy doing it, but sometimes if I'm really busy, I don't have the time to give my all. So I gave them a task to do where I was like, this will be really useful. Go to this particular venue, get some photos, we can put them on our socials. Great, sent them off. They were gone for a while, and then I get a phone call saying, oh, we've come to this point, we're by wherever, but we can't find the venue. And they go, okay, I kind of gave directions, but have you tried Googling it? No, they had not tried Googling it. And I went, okay, well, maybe start with that. And if you can't find it by Googling it, just speak to somebody and ask them. And to me, that is such an obvious thing. But there were 2 of them, and they hadn't managed to figure this out. And it's one of those things where I just go, well, you've got no initiative. You're creating more work for me in this particular situation. Who's getting anything out of it? And that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask questions and you shouldn't ask for help, but showing initiative, being a useful member of the team, even while you're gaining experience and you're learning, is kind of going to be your way into a lot of situations. So as I mentioned earlier, I worked in the Netherlands for a few months. I went for a summer school. It was not an interview. I was treating it like a mini Erasmus. I didn't count towards any grades. I was going out quite a lot. I was having a really good time. But I made a good impression, and it just turned out there was a job available coming up. There was no obvious route in. But because I'd kind of shown my skills and been good in group presentations and had conversations with the staff and things like that, they were, oh, okay, you're not just somebody who's here to learn. Actually, you have something that you can give back. And that, yeah, transferred into a role. And then, yeah, I've got the point at the bottom, transferable skills and roles. So I do a whole range of things. I'm interested in doing all of them, so I don't really want to cut down, but they all make sense to me. So even if I'm doing a workshop and teaching people how to do improvised comedy, it makes sense to the rest of my career. It's about thinking on your feet, having people skills, dealing with problems, all that kind of thing, making people feel comfortable, which feeds into some of my other work. even though there's not an obvious correlation between that and doing events management or producing or marketing, it all makes sense. So there might be situations where you go, oh, there's a role come up, but I'm not really interested in the tech industry, or I'm not interested in, I don't know, I'm looking out the window, construction, whatever it is, but there might be a role where you can gain experience that actually then turns out to be quite useful, just because there's transferable skills. So don't limit yourself to kind of only thinking about one sector. And as well, sometimes if you're struggling to get into the particular company or sector or area that you are really keen to work in, going kind of from a sideways view can be really useful. So I sort of got further into marketing because I went to work for a second university, and sort of went, oh, well, I really want to work in the international office, but I'm not getting jobs in that currently. But actually, if I go work in this department, once I'm in, and once I'm doing those skills, I can kind of pivot and get in elsewhere. Another example would be, so when we were coming out of one of the lockdowns, I went to go work for a heritage site locally. I won't name it because it had some controversies. But basically, an old building, I went to work for it, and the role that I took on did not make any sense in my career path. It was a front of house role. The requirements were, like, it's the kind of thing I could have been doing at 18. It's the kind of thing I sort of was doing at 18 when I was volunteering at a museum. But I was like, well, one, it's interesting. Two, I've spent months just sat at my laptop and I need to get out of the house. But my main reason for getting in was they had just gone through like loads of changes, and I was like, well, if I can get into that organisation, I can probably network and meet people. At some point, they're probably going to need somebody who's got maybe some of my skills, and if I'm already on the inside, I can get work. And that directly led to me getting a job, events managing an event for, or project managing an event for Nottingham Trent University and the physics department there, and that particular heritage site. So my plan did work ultimately, and it's also the reason that I ended up on the board of a heritage organisation. So the role may not have made obvious sense at the time, but I kind of had a plan and went, I don't exactly know where this is going to end up, but it's low risk, I might as well do it, and I'll probably end up connecting to quite a few people. That's kind of me doing a massive brain dump on you, talking about some of my experiences. I'll probably pause there.